The emergency room doors exploded inward at 11:47 p.m., glass spraying across white tile like shrapnel. A man the size of a linebacker crashed through, 6'5", maybe 280 pounds, covered in rain and something dark that might have been oil or blood. He grabbed the security guard by the collar and threw him into a row of chairs hard enough to bend metal. People screamed, doctors scattered, and one nurse, a woman everyone ignored, everyone dismissed, everyone treated like she didn't matter, stepped directly into his path. Her name was Sarah Brennan. 32. Quiet. The kind of person who disappeared in staff meetings. What nobody at Mercy Ridge Hospital knew was that Sarah had spent 6 years in places where hesitation got people killed. And tonight, the hospital that treated her like she was replaceable was about to learn exactly who they'd been underestimating. If you want to see how this story ends, how the woman they humiliated became the one person who could save them all, stay with me until the final moment, and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story can travel. Sarah Brennan stood behind the intake desk when the doors blew open, filling out discharge paperwork for a kid with a sprained ankle. The explosion of glass made her look up without flinching, muscle memory from a different life. But everyone else in the ER dove for cover like a bomb had gone off. The man who came through wasn't running. He was staggering. Heavy, uneven steps that said something was wrong beyond the rage twisting his face. Rain poured off his shoulders. His work boots left wet prints mixed with streaks of red. "Security!" someone shouted. The guard, a guy named Dennis, who spent most shifts scrolling his phone, stepped forward with his hand on his radio. "Sir, you need to—" The big man swung without warning. His fist caught Dennis across the jaw and sent him sprawling into a cluster of waiting room chairs. Metal screeched against tile. A woman with her arm in a sling screamed and bolted for the exit. "Everybody out!" Dr. Marcus Webb's voice cracked as he backed toward the hallway. "Get out now!" Nurses scattered. Patients scrambled. Even the triage supervisor, Janet Carver, who'd worked at Mercy Ridge for 15 years, abandoned her post and ran. Sarah didn't move. She watched the man lurch forward, knocking over a magazine rack, his breathing ragged and too fast. His eyes weren't focused. They swept the room like he couldn't see clearly, like he was searching for something he couldn't find. "Sarah, get back here!" That was Monica, another nurse, already halfway down the corridor. Sarah stepped around the desk instead. The man's head snapped toward her. His pupils were blown wide, his skin flushed and sweating despite the cold rain soaking his clothes. He opened his mouth, but nothing coherent came out, just a low guttural sound that might have been words once. "Hey," Sarah said. Not loud, not soft, just steady. He took a step toward her. "Stop right there!" That was Officer Rick Paulson, Mercy Ridge's overnight cop, standing near the entrance with his hand on his weapon. "I said stop!" The man didn't stop. He didn't even seem to hear. Sarah raised one hand, palm out, and kept walking forward. "You need to sit down." "Sarah, what the hell are you doing?" Dr. Webb hissed from somewhere behind her. She ignored him, focused on the man's gait, the way his right leg dragged slightly, the tremor in his hands, the way he kept blinking like he was trying to clear his vision. Not drugs, not psychosis. Trauma. "You're hurt," Sarah said, close enough now that she could see the way his chest heaved with each breath. "I can help you, but you need to sit down." The man swayed. His knees buckled for half a second before he caught himself against the wall. His hand left a smear of blood on the paint. "Paulson, call back up," Webb said. "This guy's dangerous." "He's not dangerous," Sarah said without looking back. "He's dying." That got everyone's attention. The ER went quiet, except for the hum of overhead lights and the distant wail of an approaching siren. The man's eyes found Sarah's. For just a moment, clarity broke through the haze. "Help," he rasped. "Can't breathe." Then his legs gave out completely. Sarah lunged forward and caught him before his head cracked against the floor. He was dead weight, pure muscle and bone, and she went down hard on one knee under his mass. Pain shot through her leg, but she held on, easing him onto his side so his airway stayed clear. "Get a gurney," she shouted. "Now!" Nobody moved. "I said now!" Monica appeared first, eyes wide, pushing a gurney from the trauma bay. Another nurse, Kelly, young and still scared, helped Sarah roll the man onto the padded surface. His breathing was worse up close, shallow, rapid, with a wet sound that meant fluid where it shouldn't be. Dr. Webb finally approached, slowly, like he was walking toward a bomb. "What's his status?" "Respiratory distress, possible internal bleeding, altered mental state." Sarah checked the man's pulse, thready and fast. "We need to intubate and get imaging stat." "We need to restrain him first," Webb countered. "He just assaulted a security guard." "He barely knows where he is. Look at his pupils. Unequal and sluggish. This isn't aggression, it's neurological compromise." Webb's face tightened. He'd been the senior ER physician at Mercy Ridge for 8 years, and he didn't like being contradicted. Especially not by Sarah Brennan, the quiet nurse who never spoke up in staff meetings, who took every extra shift without complaint, who everyone assumed was just putting in time until something better came along. "Brennan, you're out of line," Webb said. "I'll assess the patient. You stabilize and wait for my orders." Sarah's jaw clenched, but she didn't argue. Not yet. She focused on cutting away the man's soaked jacket, revealing a work shirt underneath with a company logo stitched on the pocket. Bridger Construction. His name tag said Connor Walsh. Under the shirt, his skin told a different story. Bruising. Dark purple spreading across his right thigh and hip. Fresh, maybe hours old. Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking for deformities, feeling for the telltale hardness of compartment syndrome. Her fingers found it, swollen, hot, the muscle tight as a drum beneath the skin. "Femur fracture," she said. "Compartment syndrome developing. He needs surgery." "Let me see." Webb pushed her aside and prodded the leg roughly. Connor groaned, a sound low and animal. "Could be a hematoma. We'll monitor it." "Monitor it?" Sarah's voice dropped, cold and sharp in a way that made Monica glance over. "In 30 minutes, that leg's going to necrose. He needs a fasciotomy now. I'll decide what he needs." Webb straightened up, pulling off his gloves. "Get him on oxygen and fluids. We'll run labs and see what we're dealing with." Sarah started to respond, but stopped when she saw it, a rash creeping up Connor's neck. Tiny red dots, petechiae, scattered across his skin like someone had flicked paint from a brush. Her blood went cold. She'd seen this before. Not here. Not in the sterile safety of Mercy Ridge Hospital's emergency room. She'd seen it in a field hospital outside Kandahar when a Marine took shrapnel to the femur and crashed 6 hours later despite every intervention they tried. Fat embolism syndrome. "Webb," she said quietly. Too quietly. He was already walking away. "Get him stable and move to observation. I'll check back in 20. "Webb." Louder now. He turned, irritated. "What?" "He's got petechiae. Respiratory distress. Femur fracture. This is fat embolism." Webb laughed. Actually laughed. "Fat embolism? Brennan, that's one of the rarest complications in trauma. You're jumping to conclusions." "I've seen it before." "In what, nursing school lectures?" He shook his head. "This is why you stay in your lane. You're a good nurse, but you're not a doctor. Let me do my job." The dismissal stung more than it should have. Sarah had heard variations of it for 6 months now, ever since she'd taken the job at Mercy Ridge after leaving the Army. Every suggestion ignored, every observation dismissed, every moment of experience waved away like it didn't count because she wasn't wearing the right badge. Monica touched her arm gently. "Sarah, let it go." Sarah looked down at Connor Walsh. His oxygen saturation was dropping, 93%, then 91%. His respiratory rate climbing. She couldn't let it go. "Start bagging him," Sarah told Kelly. Keep the O2 at 15 liters. Dr. Webb said, "I don't care what he said. This man is crashing, and we're running out of time." Kelly hesitated, then grabbed the bag valve mask. Monica moved to help without being asked, her earlier fear replaced by something steadier. They worked in sync, the kind of rhythm that only came from real emergency experience. The monitor alarm started screaming. Oxygen sat, 87%. "Damn it." Sarah reached for the intubation kit. "Webb." No answer. He disappeared into the back offices, probably to file an incident report about the violent patient who destroyed the waiting room. Connor's lips were turning blue. "Sarah, what do we do?" Monica's voice cracked at the edges. What they did was trust the training. Sarah grabbed the laryngoscope and moved to Connor's head. Kelly, push etomidate. Monica, hand me the 7.5 tube. They moved fast. Sarah tilted Connor's head back, inserted the blade, visualized the cords. The tube slid in smooth, and she inflated the cuff just as his oxygen sat bottomed out at 82%. Bag him, hard. Kelly squeezed the bag in steady compressions. The monitor climbed slowly, 84%, 86%, 89%. But it wasn't enough. The petechiae were spreading. His heart rate was spiking, 140, 150, 160. Sarah's hand stayed steady even as her mind raced through the possibilities. If this was fat embolism, Connor was in the golden hour before multi-organ failure set in. They needed critical care. They needed surgical intervention. They needed... The doors burst open again. Not another patient. Not security. Military police. 4 of them, moving with the kind of precision that said special operations or close to it. They wore Army combat uniforms, weapons holstered, eyes scanning the room like they were clearing hostile territory. The lead officer, a woman with lieutenant bars and a face Sarah almost recognized, stopped short when she saw the trauma bay. Then she saw Sarah. Recognition flashed across the lieutenant's face. "Brennan?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "Not here. Not now." "Lieutenant Hayes," Sarah said carefully, not looking up from Connor. "This is a civilian hospital. You don't have jurisdiction." Hayes stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "We got a call about a disturbance. Didn't expect to find you working ER in the middle of nowhere." "Well, here I am. Captain Brennan," Hayes corrected, and the title hung in the air like a bomb nobody wanted to touch. Monica's head snapped up. "Captain?" Sarah didn't answer. She was watching Connor's vitals spiral, his blood pressure dropping now, compensatory mechanisms failing one by one. Hayes moved to the opposite side of the gurney. She looked down at Connor, then at the monitor, and something shifted in her expression. "What's his status?" "Fat embolism syndrome secondary to femur fracture. He needs a level 1 trauma center, and he needed it 10 minutes ago." "Jesus." Hayes pulled out her radio. "This is Hayes. I need a medevac helicopter at Mercy Ridge Hospital. Priority 1. Patient is coding. Suspected fat embolism. Requires immediate critical care transport." "Wait," Monica started. "Do it now." Hayes snapped into the radio, then looked at Sarah. "How long's he got?" "Minutes, maybe less." Dr. Webb chose that moment to return, coffee cup in hand, his face shifting from annoyed to confused to angry in the span of 3 seconds. "What the hell is going on here? Who authorized military personnel in my ER?" Hayes ignored him completely. She pulled a small medical kit from her belt and handed it to Sarah. "You still remember the protocols?" Sarah opened the kit. Combat gauze, emergency meds, the kind of gear that didn't belong in civilian hospitals. "Yeah, I remember." "Good." Hayes turned to Webb. "You're going to step back and let Captain Brennan work." "Captain?" Webb's face flushed red. "She's a nurse, and this is my ER. She's an Army trauma surgeon with 6 years of combat experience and more emergency saves than your entire staff combined." Hayes's voice could have cut steel. "So unless you want to explain to a military inquiry board why you let a patient die because you were too proud to listen, I suggest you shut up and assist." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah didn't wait for permission. She started pushing meds, steroids to reduce inflammation, fluids to maintain blood pressure, every intervention she'd learned in field hospitals where hesitation meant body bags. Connor's vitals stabilized, barely, just enough to buy time. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night outside. Hayes coordinated with her team, clearing a path to the roof. Sarah stayed with Connor, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, every second that meant the difference between life and death. Dr. Webb stood frozen near the doorway. Monica and Kelly stared at Sarah like they were seeing her for the first time. When the flight medics arrived, Army critical care specialists who moved with brutal efficiency, they transferred Connor to their gurney and started the move to the helipad. Sarah followed automatically, her hands still on the IV lines. One of the medics glanced at her name tag. "Brennan? You the one who called this in?" "Yeah." "Good catch. Fat embolism's a bitch to spot early." They loaded Connor into the helicopter. Sarah stood back as the rotor spun up, wind whipping her scrubs against her body. Hayes appeared beside her, arms crossed. "You left the army to work here?" Hayes had to shout over the noise. "Needed a change." "Looks like they needed you more than you needed the change." The helicopter lifted off, banking east toward the regional trauma center 40 miles away. Sarah watched until the lights disappeared into the darkness. When she turned back toward the ER entrance, she saw them. Dr. Webb, Monica, Kelly, Dennis the security guard holding an ice pack to his jaw, Officer Paulson, Janet Carver, a dozen others clustered near the shattered waiting room doors, all of them staring. Hayes stepped forward, addressing the crowd. For those who don't know, Sarah Brennan served as a combat trauma surgeon attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment. She's credited with saving over 200 lives in active war zones under enemy fire. Hayes paused, letting that sink in. She's also the recipient of the Bronze Star for Valor after performing emergency surgery during a sustained firefight in Helmand Province. Monica's hand went to her mouth. Dr. Webb's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. And Sarah stood there, soaked in Connor Walsh's blood, her carefully rebuilt civilian life cracking open like the emergency room doors. Hayes pulled out her phone and showed Sarah the screen. "The Army's been trying to reach you. There's a situation developing overseas. They want you back." "I'm done with that life." "Are you?" Hayes glanced at the destroyed waiting room, the blood on the floor, the way Sarah's hands were still steady despite everything. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like that life isn't done with you." Sarah didn't answer. Because somewhere in the administrative offices of Mercy Ridge Hospital, alarms were starting to go off. Security footage was being reviewed, questions were being asked, and the carefully constructed wall between who Sarah had been and who she was pretending to be was starting to collapse. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in his office 30 minutes later, watching the security footage replay on his computer screen. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. He watched himself run, watched Sarah step forward, watched her save a man's life while everyone else scattered like frightened children. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital administrator. "My office, 7 a.m. Bring incident reports." Webb's hand shook as he typed a response, because he'd just realized something that turned his stomach to ice. The woman he'd dismissed, the nurse he'd mocked for being too intense, had more emergency experience than his entire medical career. And everyone was about to find out he'd nearly killed a patient because he was too arrogant to listen. The night shift dragged on. Sarah cleaned blood off her scrubs in the staff bathroom, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. Monica found her there an hour before dawn. "Captain?" Monica's voice was small. "Don't call me that." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sarah dried her hands roughly. "Because it doesn't matter. I'm not that person anymore." "The hell you're not." Monica stepped closer. "Sarah, you saved that man's life. Webb would have let him die." "Webb's a good doctor. He's a coward." Monica's voice hardened. "We all saw the footage. While you were fighting to keep Connor Walsh alive, Webb was hiding in his office. And he's going to try to bury this. You know he will." Sarah did know. She'd seen it before. How institutions protected their own. How inconvenient truths got filed away and forgotten. But this time felt different. This time there were military witnesses, video evidence, a patient who'd lived to tell the story because Sarah refused to let him die. "What are you going to do?" Monica asked. Sarah looked at her reflection finally, saw the exhaustion, saw the woman who'd spent 6 months trying to disappear into the background of civilian life, saw someone who was tired of being invisible. "I'm going to show up for my shift tomorrow," Sarah said quietly. "And we're going to see what happens." What happened was the hospital administrator called an emergency meeting at 6 a.m. before Sarah's shift technically ended. Every staff member who'd been present during the incident was required to attend. Sarah walked into the conference room to find Dr. Webb already seated, his face pale and drawn. Administrator Patricia Rios stood at the head of the table. She was a thin woman in her 50s, all sharp angles and sharper ambition. She'd been with Mercy Ridge for 3 years and had a reputation for protecting the hospital's image above everything else. "Let's make this quick," Rios said as everyone settled in. "Last night's incident is already generating media attention. A patient assaulted security, destroyed property, and required military medical evacuation. I need to understand exactly what happened and who's responsible." Sarah felt Monica tense beside her. Webb cleared his throat. The patient arrived in an agitated state. He was clearly under the influence of something. Drugs, alcohol, I'm not sure. He became violent and... He wasn't on drugs, Sarah interrupted. Rios's eyes cut to her. Excuse me? Connor Walsh wasn't intoxicated. He was suffering from fat embolism syndrome following a femur fracture. His altered mental state was neurological, not chemical. And you determined this how? Rios's tone was ice. Clinical presentation, petechiae rash, respiratory distress, mechanism of injury. The Army medevac team confirmed my diagnosis. The Army. Rios tapped her pen against the table. Yes, let's talk about that. You called in military support without authorization. You performed medical procedures above your scope of practice. You created a situation that exposed this hospital to significant liability. Sarah's pulse kicked up, but her voice stayed level. I saved a man's life. You created chaos, Rios countered. Dr. Webb, what's your assessment? Webb shifted in his seat. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw something like guilt flicker across his face. Then it was gone. Nurse Brennan acted impulsively, Webb said carefully. While her intentions may have been good, she overstepped her authority and undermined the chain of command. In a high-stress situation, that kind of behavior is dangerous. Dangerous? Sarah's voice dropped to something cold and sharp. What's dangerous is a doctor who runs away when patients need him. The room went silent. Webb's face flushed red. I was securing the scene. That's protocol. You were hiding. That's enough, Rios snapped. Brennan, you're suspended pending investigation. 2 weeks, no pay. You're not to contact patients, speak to media, or return to hospital property without written authorization. Monica stood up. That's not fair. She saved... Sit down, Monica, or you'll join her. Monica sat. Sarah didn't move. She looked at Rios, then at Webb, then at every person around the table who'd stood by and watched while she fought alone. Fine, Sarah said quietly. She stood, pushed in her chair, and walked out without looking back. The hallway outside was empty. Sarah made it to the parking lot before her hands started shaking. She sat in her car as the sun rose over Mercy Ridge, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of tracer fire and burning buildings. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Captain Brennan. This is Lieutenant Hayes. I need you to call me. It's important. Sarah deleted the message. Then she drove home to her small apartment on the edge of town and tried to sleep. She couldn't, because 3 hours later her phone rang again. This time it was a reporter from the local news station. Ms. Brennan, this is Jake Cordero with Channel 7 News. I'm doing a story on the incident at Mercy Ridge Hospital last night. I understand you were involved? No comment. I've obtained security footage showing you subduing a violent patient. The hospital is calling it excessive force. Would you like to respond? Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. They said what? Administrator Rios released a statement an hour ago. She claims you used unnecessary physical intervention and created a dangerous situation. They're considering pressing charges. The world tilted sideways. Sarah ended the call and turned on the television. Channel 7 was already running the story. Grainy security footage showed Connor Walsh crashing through the ER doors, showed Sarah stepping forward, showed the moment she dropped him to the floor. The caption read, Nurse under investigation for excessive force. Administrator Rios appeared on screen, her expression grave and practiced. While we appreciate Ms. Brennan's service to our hospital, we cannot condone violence in any form. Patient safety is our top priority. Sarah's phone exploded with calls. Monica, Kelly, numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them, until one call came through that she couldn't ignore. Sarah Brennan? A man's voice, official and clipped. Who is this? Colonel Marcus Reeves, U.S. Army Medical Command. I need you to listen very carefully. Sarah sat on the edge of her couch, phone pressed to her ear, Colonel Reeves's voice cutting through the static like a blade. I'm listening, she said. The Army has reviewed the incident at Mercy Ridge Hospital. We're aware of the situation with Connor Walsh, and we're aware of what the hospital administration is attempting to do. Reeves paused. They're making a mistake. Colonel, I left the service. Whatever happened last night doesn't change that. It changes everything. You saved a veteran's life using skills the Army trained you for. Now a civilian hospital is trying to destroy your reputation to cover their own incompetence. We don't abandon our people, Captain. Not then, not now. Sarah rubbed her eyes. She hadn't slept in 26 hours, and exhaustion was starting to blur the edges of her thoughts. What do you want from me? Permission to intervene. We can release your service record, make it clear who you are and what you're capable of. But I need your consent. And if I say no, then you fight this alone. And hospitals have expensive lawyers. Sarah looked at the television, still playing footage of her dropping Connor Walsh to the floor. The news ticker called her a rogue nurse under investigation. Administrator Rios's face filled the screen, her expression professionally concerned. Do it, Sarah said. You're sure? I'm sure. Reeves's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, Captain, you did the right thing, both last night and just now. The call ended. Sarah sat in the silence of her apartment, listening to her own heartbeat. She'd spent 6 months trying to disappear into civilian life, trying to forget the weight of decisions made under fire. Now that weight was back, pressing down on her chest like a physical thing. Her phone buzzed, a text from Monica. They're destroying you on the news? This is bullshit. What can I do? Sarah didn't reply. There was nothing Monica could do, nothing anyone could do except wait and see which version of the truth people chose to believe. She fell asleep on the couch sometime around noon, still wearing her scrubs, and dreamed of helicopter rotors and blood that wouldn't wash clean. When she woke, it was dark outside and her phone had 43 missed calls. The first one she returned was from a number she recognized, Connor Walsh's emergency contact information from his hospital admission form. A woman answered on the second ring. Hello? This is Sarah Brennan. I'm trying to reach someone regarding Connor Walsh. Silence. Then, you're the nurse, the one who saved him. Is Connor okay? He's in surgery. They said... The woman's voice broke. They said if you hadn't caught it when you did, he'd be dead. I'm his sister, Amy. Sarah closed her eyes. I'm glad he made it. The news is saying you hurt him, that you were violent. I did what I had to do to keep him alive. I know. Amy's voice strengthened. Connor regained consciousness for a few minutes before they took him back to the OR. He told me what happened, said he remembers you being the only one who didn't run, said you looked at him like you understood. Something tight loosened in Sarah's chest. He was scared. People do things when they're scared. The hospital called me, asked if I wanted to file a complaint against you, said you used excessive force. Sarah's jaw clenched. And? I told them to go to hell. Amy laughed, sharp and bitter. My brother's alive because of you. I don't care how you did it. They talked for another 10 minutes. Amy promised to keep Sarah updated on Connor's condition. When the call ended, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months, a small, fragile sense that maybe she hadn't made the wrong choice coming forward. That feeling lasted exactly 48 minutes, because at 9:37 p.m., her doorbell rang. Sarah checked the peephole and saw 2 men in suits. One held a badge to the glass. Police detectives. She opened the door but left the chain on. Can I help you? The older detective, graying hair, tired eyes, spoke first. Sarah Brennan? I'm Detective William Cortez, Mercy Ridge PD. This is my partner, Detective Ian Foster. We need to ask you some questions about the incident at the hospital. I already gave a statement to Officer Paulson. This is a follow-up. Mercy Ridge Hospital has filed a formal complaint alleging assault and practicing medicine without a license. We need your side of the story. Sarah's stomach dropped. You're investigating me. Just gathering facts, ma'am. Can we come in? She let them in because refusing would have looked worse. They sat in her small living room, recording devices visible on the coffee table, and asked her to walk through everything that happened. Sarah kept her answers short and factual. Yes, she'd physically restrained Connor Walsh. Yes, she'd performed medical procedures. No, she didn't regret it. Detective Cortez scribbled notes. Foster watched her with the kind of neutral expression cops used when they'd already decided you were guilty. You were Army? Cortez asked. Yes. What kind of discharge? Honorable. Medical retirement after my second tour. And you're trained as a surgeon? Combat trauma surgeon, attached to special operations units overseas. Foster leaned forward. So you know how to handle violent situations. It wasn't a question. Sarah met his eyes. I know how to handle emergencies. Mr. Walsh says he doesn't remember attacking you. Says he was confused, disoriented. Hospital security footage shows you dropping him to the ground pretty hard. That seemed necessary to you? He was 6'5" and 280 pounds, heading toward a pediatric treatment room where a 7-year-old patient was alone. Yes, it was necessary. Pediatric room was empty, Foster said. We checked. Sarah's blood went cold. There was a boy. Asthma attack. Nurse Monica Ruiz. She was treating him right before everything went wrong. Nurse Ruiz says the patient had already been moved to another area. The room was vacant. Cortez flipped through his notes. Hospital administration confirms no children were in danger during the incident. Sarah's mind raced. She remembered seeing the treatment room door open, the small bed visible inside. But had she actually seen a patient, or had she just assumed based on the earlier activity? I thought there was a child, she said carefully. Foster smiled like he'd just won something. So you attacked Mr. Walsh based on an assumption. I restrained him based on his behavior and the immediate threat he posed. To an empty room. To everyone in the ER. The interview went on for another 30 minutes. Every answer Sarah gave felt like walking through a minefield. When the detectives finally left, Cortez handed her a card. If you think of anything else, call me, he said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes said something different. Be careful. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, her heart hammering. The hospital wasn't just trying to discredit her. They were building a criminal case. She called Monica immediately. The little boy, Sarah said when Monica picked up. The asthma patient. Where was he? What? During the incident with Connor Walsh, where was the boy you were treating? Monica was quiet for a beat too long. Sarah, I moved him to the isolation room about 10 minutes before Walsh came through the doors. The treatment room was empty. You're sure? I'm sure. Why? Sarah closed her eyes. The police think I made it up. Think I used excessive force based on nothing. That's insane. You didn't know the room was empty. And even if you did, Walsh was still a threat. But Monica's voice had something in it Sarah recognized. Doubt. Not in Sarah's intentions, but in what the situation would look like to people who hadn't been there. Did the hospital ask you to say that? Sarah asked quietly. Say what? That the room was empty, that there was no danger. No, Sarah, it's the truth. Yeah, okay. Sarah ended the call and sat in the dark, trying to piece together what was happening. The hospital had suspended her. The media was running stories about excessive force. The police were investigating assault charges. And now the one detail that justified her actions, protecting a child, was being erased. She'd seen this before. Not here. Not in civilian life. But she'd seen it in the military when operations went wrong and someone needed to take the fall. The truth mattered less than the narrative, and institutions always protected themselves first. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. What? Sarah answered, too tired to be polite. Captain Brennan, this is Jake Cordero from Channel 7 News. We spoke earlier. I said no comment. Wait. Don't hang up. I've been digging into the story and something doesn't add up. The hospital's version of events doesn't match the timeline. I think you're being set up. Sarah hesitated. Why do you care? Because I don't like watching people get railroaded. And because my brother's a Marine. He told me about combat medics, what they go through. You don't come back from that and randomly assault people. What do you want? An interview, on camera. Your side of the story before the hospital controls the entire narrative. The hospital told me not to speak to media. The hospital doesn't own you, not anymore. Sarah thought about Administrator Rios's face on television, thought about Dr. Webb hiding in his office, thought about every person who'd dismissed her for 6 months like she was invisible. When? She asked. Tomorrow, noon. I'll come to you. Sarah agreed and ended the call. She knew it was a risk, knew it could backfire, but staying silent while they destroyed her wasn't an option either. She managed 3 hours of sleep that night, then woke to her phone ringing at 6 a.m. Colonel Reeves again. Turn on the news, he said without preamble. Sarah grabbed the remote. Channel 7 was running a breaking story. The caption read, Mercy Ridge nurse, a decorated war veteran, hospital under fire. Jake Cordero stood outside Mercy Ridge Hospital, his expression serious. We've obtained military service records for Sarah Brennan, the nurse suspended by Mercy Ridge administration following last week's incident. According to these documents, Captain Brennan served 6 years as a combat trauma surgeon with the 75th Ranger Regiment. She's credited with saving over 200 lives in active combat zones and received the Bronze Star for performing emergency surgery during a sustained firefight in Afghanistan. Men. The screen cut to footage of Sarah in uniform, younger, harder, standing beside soldiers in desert camouflage. Sarah barely recognized herself. Cordero continued. Hospital Administrator Patricia Rios has declined to comment on why a decorated military surgeon was working as a staff nurse, or why her combat medical experience wasn't utilized during the emergency. The Army has released a statement defending Captain Brennan's actions and questioning the hospital's response to a life-threatening emergency. Sarah's phone started ringing. Then it didn't stop. Monica called. Sarah, oh my God, are you seeing this? Kelly called. Everyone's talking about you. The whole hospital's losing their minds. Amy Walsh called. Connor woke up. He saw the news. He wants to talk to you. And then Administrator Patricia Rios called. Sarah almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Ms. Brennan? Rios's voice was tight, controlled. We need to meet. Today. I'm suspended. You said I couldn't come to hospital property. My office, 2 p.m. We need to discuss your situation. My lawyer will be there, Sarah said, even though she didn't have a lawyer. Fine. 2 p.m. The call ended. Sarah sat there, phone in hand, watching the news cycle repeat her story over and over. The hospital that dismissed her was now scrambling to contain the damage. The media that called her violent was now calling her a hero. And somewhere in the middle was the truth, that she was just a person trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. She called Colonel Reeves back. I need a lawyer, she said. Already handled. Captain Lisa Torres, JAG Corps. She's civilian now, does medical malpractice defense. I took the liberty of sending her your case file. She'll call you within the hour. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This fight's just getting started. Captain Lisa Torres called at 7:15 a.m. She had a voice like gravel and got straight to the point. I've reviewed everything. The hospital's in a bad position. They suspended a decorated veteran for saving a patient's life, then tried to criminally charge you for it. Public opinion's turning against them fast. What about the police investigation? That's trickier. The assault allegation has merit on paper. You did physically restrain Connor Walsh, but the context matters. We'll argue exigent circumstances, imminent threat, good faith belief that a child was in danger. The child wasn't there. Doesn't matter. You believed he was. That's what counts legally. Sarah felt a small measure of tension ease. So what happens at the meeting? They're going to try to make this go away quietly. Offer reinstatement, maybe a settlement. They want you to sign an NDA and disappear. And if I don't? Torres laughed. Then we burn them to the ground. But Sarah, you need to understand, going to war with a hospital is expensive, exhausting, and public. Your life becomes the story. Every mistake you've ever made gets examined, every decision questioned. Are you ready for that? Sarah thought about Dr. Webb's condescending voice, about Administrator Rios's cold dismissal, about 6 months of being treated like she didn't matter. Yeah, she said, I'm ready. At 2 p.m., Sarah walked into Mercy Ridge Hospital with Captain Torres beside her. Staff stared as they passed through the lobby. Some looked away. Others nodded in what might have been respect or might have been guilt. Administrator Rios's office was on the 3rd floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture that screamed budget priorities. Rios sat behind her desk with Dr. Marcus Webb beside her and 2 other people Sarah didn't recognize, a man in a suit who screamed corporate lawyer and a woman with a tablet who was probably HR. Torres didn't wait for pleasantries. Let's hear it. Rios cleared her throat. We've had time to review the incident more thoroughly. While we maintain that proper protocols weren't followed, we recognize that Ms. Brennan acted with good intentions under stressful circumstances. Captain Brennan, Torres corrected. Excuse me? Her rank is captain. Use it. Rios's jaw tightened. Captain Brennan? We're prepared to lift the suspension immediately and offer full reinstatement with back pay. In exchange, we ask that you sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement and refrain from further media contact regarding the incident. No, Sarah said. The corporate lawyer leaned forward. Miss Captain Brennan, this is a generous offer. The alternative is continued investigation, possible criminal charges, and a very public legal battle that won't benefit anyone. Torres smiled. Except the truth. The truth, Webb said, speaking for the first time, is that Captain Brennan violated hospital protocol, performed medical procedures outside her scope of practice, and created a dangerous situation that could have resulted in serious injury or death. The truth, Torres countered, is that Captain Brennan saved a man's life while Dr. Webb hid in his office, and the security footage proves it. Webb's face went red. I was securing the scene. You were 30 yards from the incident, behind a locked door for 11 minutes. That's not securing anything. That's cowardice. How dare you? Enough, Rios snapped. She looked at Sarah. What do you want? Sarah met her eyes. I want Dr. Webb investigated for abandoning his post during a medical emergency. I want a formal review of how this hospital treats nurses with advanced training, and I want a public apology. That's not going to happen, the corporate lawyer said. Then we'll see you in court. Torres stood. Sarah followed her lead. Wait. Rios's voice cracked slightly. Let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can find a middle ground. There is no middle ground, Torres said. You tried to destroy Captain Brennan's career to cover your own failures. Now you either make it right or we make it public. Your choice. They left the office. Sarah's hands were shaking, but she kept them steady until they reached the parking lot. That was, Sarah started. Deeply satisfying, Torres finished. Yeah, but it's not over. They're going to dig in now. Get mean. You sure you're ready? Sarah thought about Connor Walsh's sister thanking her through tears, about Monica's text asking what she could do to help, about every patient who'd ever needed her and every person who'd ever dismissed her. I'm ready. What Sarah wasn't ready for was what happened 3 hours later. She was home, trying to decompress, when her phone rang. Amy Walsh. Sarah, you need to see this. Connor's awake. He's talking to the media. Sarah turned on the television. Connor Walsh sat in a hospital bed, his leg elevated, his face gaunt but alive. Amy stood beside him. A cluster of reporters crowded the room. Connor's voice was rough but clear. I want to talk about what happened at Mercy Ridge Hospital. I was in an accident at the construction site. Crushed my leg. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't think straight. I just knew I needed help. I drove myself to the ER, and that's the last clear memory I have until I woke up here. A reporter asked, Do you remember Sarah Brennan? I remember someone stepping toward me when everyone else ran. I remember a woman's voice telling me I was going to be okay. And I remember feeling like maybe I would be. Connor's eyes got wet. The doctors here told me I was dying, that if I'd gotten here 30 minutes later, or if someone hadn't caught what was wrong, I'd be dead. Sarah Brennan saved my life, and the hospital tried to destroy her for it. Mr. Walsh, Mercy Ridge Administration says Ms. Brennan used excessive force. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, Connor interrupted. I've been in fights. Real ones. What Sarah did wasn't excessive. It was controlled, professional. She stopped me from hurting someone or myself, and she did it without causing any permanent damage. That's not assault. That's training. Amy stepped closer to her brother. The hospital called us and asked if we wanted to press charges against Sarah. They tried to convince us she hurt Connor, but we were there at the trauma center when he came in. We heard the doctors saying how lucky he was that someone recognized fat embolism syndrome early. They said most people, most doctors, miss it until it's too late. Another reporter, what do you want to see happen now? Connor looked directly into the camera. I want Mercy Ridge Hospital to tell the truth. I want them to admit they failed that night and Sarah Brennan saved me. And I want Dr. Marcus Webb to answer why he wasn't there when patients needed him. The interview continued, but Sarah stopped listening. She grabbed her phone and called Torres. Did you see it? Watching now, Torres said. This changes everything. A grateful patient contradicting the hospital's narrative on live television? They're going to have to respond. How? Not sure yet, but I guarantee they're panicking right now. Torres was right. Within an hour, Mercy Ridge Hospital released a statement saying they were conducting an internal review and would release findings within 10 business days. It was bureaucratic nonsense designed to buy time, but it also meant they were backing down from the criminal charges. Detective Cortez called Sarah that evening. "The DA's declining to prosecute," he said. "Not enough evidence and too much public sympathy. You're clear." "Just like that?" "Nothing's just like that, but yeah, consider yourself lucky." Sarah didn't feel lucky. She felt exhausted and wired at the same time, like she'd been running uphill for days and someone had just told her the hill went on forever. But something was shifting. She could feel it. The next morning, Sarah woke to text from Monica, Kelly, and 3 other nurses from Mercy Ridge. They all said variations of the same thing. "We're with you, whatever happens next." At 10 a.m., Jake Cordero's follow-up story aired. He'd interviewed other nurses who worked with Sarah, other patients who'd been in the ER that night. The picture that emerged was damning. An overwhelmed hospital cutting corners, an administration more concerned with image than patient care, and a staff intimidated into silence. One nurse, Janet Carver, the triage supervisor who'd run during the incident, spoke on condition of anonymity. "We're told to keep our heads down and not make waves. Anyone who speaks up gets targeted." Sarah Brennan spoke up, and look what they did to her. At 2 p.m., the Hospital Workers Union released a statement supporting Sarah and demanding an independent investigation into working conditions at Mercy Ridge. At 4 p.m., 2 more nurses came forward with stories of being punished for reporting safety concerns. By 6 p.m., 3 local politicians were calling for state health department oversight. Sarah watched it all unfold from her apartment, feeling like she was outside her own body. This wasn't what she'd wanted. She just wanted to do her job, to help people, to maybe find some quiet after years of chaos. Instead, she'd become the center of a firestorm that was consuming everything around her. Monica called that evening. "Sarah, you should know, Dr. Webb resigned, just announced it an hour ago." Sarah sat down slowly. "He what?" "Resigned, effective immediately. He released a statement saying he's stepping away to focus on his health or something, but everyone knows why." "Because of me." "Because he screwed up and got caught." Monica's voice was fierce. "You didn't do this to him. He did it to himself." After Monica hung up, Sarah sat in the silence of her apartment and tried to feel something about Webb's resignation. Satisfaction, vindication, anything. But all she felt was tired. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You need to see this, now." Attached was a link to a private file sharing site. Sarah clicked it. The file loaded slowly. Internal hospital emails, administrative documents, personnel records. And there, buried in a thread from 3 months ago, was an email from Administrator Patricia Rios to Dr. Marcus Webb. "Continue reducing nursing staff overtime. Cut per-patient nursing ratios where possible. Board wants 12% cost reduction this quarter. Find it in labor." Another email, from Webb to Rios. "Brennan keeps flagging safety issues. She's disruptive. Recommend reassignment or termination." Rios' response, "Too risky right now. Military background could create problems. Manage her. Make her want to leave on her own." Sarah's hands went numb. They'd been trying to force her out for months. Every dismissed suggestion, every ignored observation, every condescending comment, it had all been deliberate. She forwarded the emails to Torres and to Jake Cordero. Then she sat back and waited for the bomb to drop. It dropped at 11 p.m. when Cordero ran an emergency broadcast. Channel 7 News has obtained internal hospital documents showing a pattern of retaliation against whistleblowers and systematic cost-cutting measures that may have compromised patient safety. These emails suggest hospital administration actively worked to silence nurses who raised concerns, including Sarah Brennan. The emails appeared on screen, names redacted but context clear. Cordero continued. "We've reached out to Mercy Ridge Hospital for comment. Administrator Patricia Rios has not responded. But sources inside the hospital tell us staff are demanding answers, and at least 6 nurses have filed formal complaints with the state health board." Sarah's phone exploded again. But this time the calls weren't just from reporters or lawyers. They were from other hospitals, offering jobs, offering support, offering everything Mercy Ridge had denied her. One call came from a hospital administrator in Seattle. "Captain Brennan, we've been following your situation. We're opening a new trauma center and we need experienced leadership. If you're interested in relocating, we'd like to discuss an opportunity." Another from Boston, another from Denver. Sarah declined them all politely, because somewhere in the chaos, she'd realized something. She wasn't running anymore. The next morning, Sarah drove to Mercy Ridge Hospital for the first time since her suspension. Not because she'd been invited back, not because anyone had called, because she was done waiting for permission. She walked through the main entrance at 7 a.m., still wearing civilian clothes, and headed straight for the ER. Security saw her coming. Dennis, the guard Connor Walsh had thrown across the room, stepped into her path. "Ma'am, you can't be here. I'm checking on my patients." "You're suspended." "I'm not suspended anymore. Didn't anyone tell you?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him the email Torres had forwarded at 6:47 a.m., an official notification from Mercy Ridge Legal Department lifting all employment restrictions pending the administrative review. Dennis looked uncertain. "I need to verify this." "Go ahead. I'll be in the ER." She walked past him. Monica saw her first and rushed over. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "Working." "But they lifted the suspension. I'm back." Word spread fast. Within minutes, the ER staff knew Sarah Brennan had returned. Some looked relieved, others looked nervous. A few looked scared of what her presence meant for the fragile peace the hospital was trying to maintain. Kelly approached carefully. "Do you need help with anything?" "Yeah, I need a patient update on bed 7, and someone tell me what cases we've got waiting." They fell into the rhythm without thinking about it, the natural flow of emergency medicine where hesitation killed people. Sarah moved through the ER like she'd never left, checking charts, adjusting treatment plans, asking questions the way she always had. At 9 a.m., the day shift supervisor arrived. A man named Richard Ortiz, who'd worked at Mercy Ridge for 12 years and had never once acknowledged Sarah's combat experience. He stopped short when he saw her. "Brennan, you're back." "I'm back." "Administration know you're here." "They should. They're the ones who lifted my suspension." Ortiz's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't say. Finally, "We're short-staffed today. Glad to have the help." It wasn't an apology, wasn't even close, but it was something. Sarah worked through the morning, losing herself in the familiar chaos of the ER. A kid with a broken arm, an elderly woman with chest pain, a construction worker with a nail through his hand. Normal. Routine. Exactly what she needed. At noon, Administrator Patricia Rios appeared in the ER entrance, flanked by 2 people Sarah didn't recognize. Her face was pale, her expression tight. "Captain Brennan, my office. Now." The ER went quiet. Sarah looked at the patient she was treating, the construction worker, his hand bandaged and elevated. "I need to finish this." "Now, Captain." Sarah met her eyes. "No." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Rios's face flushed. "I'm still the administrator of this hospital, and I'm still a nurse with a patient who needs care. So either you wait or you leave. Your choice." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Rios turned and walked out, her escort scrambling to follow. Monica let out a breath. "Holy shit, Sarah." Sarah went back to bandaging the construction worker's hand. Her own hands were steady, but inside her heart was racing. Because she'd just crossed a line there was no uncrossing, and whatever happened next was going to decide everything. 20 minutes later, Sarah finished with her patient and headed to the administrative wing. Rios's office door was open. Inside, Rios sat with her hands folded on the desk, her expression unreadable. "Close the door," Rios said. Sarah closed it. "That was a mistake," Rios said quietly. "Defying me in front of staff." "Was it? I could fire you right now. For insubordination. For creating a hostile work environment." "You could try." Sarah stayed standing. But after the emails leaked, after the union got involved, after the state started asking questions, I think firing me would be the worst decision you could make. Rios's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Captain Brennan?" "I want you to stop trying to bury problems. I want this hospital to actually care about patients more than quarterly profits. And I want you to admit that you were wrong. That's not going to happen." "Then we're done here." Sarah turned to leave. "Wait." Rios's voice cracked slightly. "The board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. They're reviewing my position as administrator." Sarah stopped but didn't turn around. "If I go down," Rios continued, "I'm not going down alone. Webb resigned, but there are others. Department heads who signed off on the staffing cuts, executives who approved the budget reductions. If the board wants to clean house, half the leadership is gone. Good. You really want to burn it all down? This hospital serves 60,000 people. If we collapse, where do they go? Sarah finally turned. Maybe they go somewhere that actually gives a damn about keeping them alive. She left Rios sitting in her office and walked back to the ER. Her shift wasn't technically over for another 3 hours, but nobody questioned when she gathered her things and headed for the exit. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and cold. Sarah sat in her car and watched people coming and going from the hospital. Patients with worried faces, families holding each other, staff in scrubs moving between buildings. Her phone buzzed. Jake Cordero, State Health Board just announced a formal investigation into Mercy Ridge. You did it. Another text from Colonel Reeves. Proud of you, Captain. Whatever happens next, you held the line. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The weight lifting, the tension releasing, the sense that maybe, finally, something was changing. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah Brennan? Captain Brennan, this is Director Michelle Torres with the State Department of Health. I'm calling to inform you that you've been named as a protected whistleblower in the Mercy Ridge investigation. We'll need your full cooperation and testimony. Understood. There's something else. We've received allegations that go beyond staffing issues, financial fraud, improper billing, patient care manipulation for insurance reimbursement. If even half of what we're hearing is true, Mercy Ridge Hospital is facing criminal charges. Sarah's breath caught. Criminal? The investigation is just beginning, but Captain Brennan, you may have exposed something much bigger than anyone realized. The call ended. Sarah sat in her car, phone in hand, and tried to process what she'd just heard. She'd wanted justice, wanted accountability, wanted the people who dismissed her to face consequences. But this was something else entirely. Her phone rang again immediately. Amy Walsh. Sarah, Connor wants to meet you in person. Can you come to the trauma center? When? Now, if you can. There's something he needs to tell you, something about the night he got hurt. What is it? He won't say over the phone, but Sarah, he says it's important. Says it changes everything. Sarah started her car. The trauma center was 40 miles east, the same place the Army medevac had taken Connor Walsh after she'd saved his life. She had no idea what Connor wanted to tell her, but the way Amy's voice had trembled when she said changes everything made Sarah's combat instincts kick in, the sense that something dangerous was about to surface. She drove east into the fading afternoon light, leaving Mercy Ridge Hospital behind in her rearview mirror. And somewhere in the administrative wing, Patricia Rios sat alone in her office, staring at the phone in her hand and the message that had just arrived from the hospital's board of directors. Emergency meeting moved to tonight. 8 p.m. Your presence is mandatory. Bring legal representation. The trauma center sat on the edge of the city like a fortress, all concrete and glass and the kind of institutional architecture that said serious money and serious medicine. Sarah parked in the visitor lot and checked her phone. Amy had texted the room number, ICU, 4th floor, bed 412. The elevator ride felt too long. Sarah's mind churned through possibilities. What could Connor Walsh possibly know that changed everything? He'd been barely conscious during the incident, dying from an injury he didn't even understand. What could he have seen? The ICU was quiet. Amy stood outside Connor's room, arms crossed, her face drawn with exhaustion. When she saw Sarah, something like relief crossed her features. Thank you for coming. What's this about? Amy glanced through the window into Connor's room. He's been having nightmares, waking up screaming. The doctors thought it was trauma from the injury, PTSD from the pain, but last night he remembered something. Something about the accident. Sarah's stomach tightened. What kind of something? He says it wasn't an accident. The words hung between them like a physical thing. Sarah pushed open the door. Connor Walsh looked better than he had in the news footage. Color in his face, eyes clear, the breathing tube gone. But there was something else now, something dark and afraid living behind his expression. Captain Brennan? His voice was still rough but stronger. Sit, please. Sarah pulled a chair close to the bed. Amy stayed by the door. Your sister says you remembered something. Yeah. Connor's hands twisted the blanket. I was on a job site. Bridger Construction, commercial build downtown. We were pouring foundation for a new medical plaza. I was running the excavator, moving rebar. He stopped, swallowed hard. There was another guy, supervisor, name's Derek Hastings. He told me to keep working, even though the rebar cage wasn't secured properly. I said it was dangerous. He said do it anyway or find another job. Sarah waited. The cage shifted. Whole thing came down. Must have weighed 2 tons, caught my leg, crushed the femur. I remember the pain and then nothing clear until I was driving. I don't even remember getting in my truck. Traumatic injuries can cause confusion, memory gaps. That's not the part that matters. Connor leaned forward slightly, wincing. Before I passed out at the site, I heard Hastings on his phone. Heard him say, just leave him. He was working alone. Nobody saw anything. Then I heard equipment moving. They were covering it up. Sarah, they left me there to die. The room went cold. Amy's voice from the doorway. We reported it to OSHA yesterday. They're investigating. But Connor wanted you to know because Bridger Construction is building the new wing at Mercy Ridge Hospital, Connor finished. $15 million contract. I saw the plans in the site office, and I heard Hastings mention Dr. Webb's name on the phone. Said Webb will handle his end. Sarah's pulse kicked. Webb knew about this? I don't know what he knew, but Hastings said his name right before they left me buried under a pile of rebar. Sarah stood slowly. Her mind was racing, connecting dots that formed a picture she didn't want to see. Webb pushing cost reductions. Rios demanding budget cuts. A construction company with a major hospital contract willing to cover up a worker's near death to avoid delays and liability. Did you tell the investigators this? OSHA knows, police know, but Sarah, Connor's eyes locked on hers. If Mercy Ridge is involved in covering this up, if they knew Bridger was cutting corners and people were getting hurt, that's not just negligence. That's criminal conspiracy. Amy moved closer. Connor thinks you were targeted. That suspension, the assault charges, all of it. He thinks they were trying to discredit you before you could connect the dots. I didn't know any of this, Sarah said. But you knew something was wrong. You saw things other people missed. You asked questions, and maybe that was enough to make you dangerous. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from Captain Torres. We need to talk, now. Don't go back to the hospital. Then another from Jake Cordero. Just got a tip. Federal investigators are involved. Something about Medicare fraud and construction kickbacks. Call me. Sarah looked at Connor. How long have you known about the connection to Mercy Ridge? I remembered yesterday morning. Told Amy. Told the investigators. But I wanted you to hear it from me. You saved my life. You deserve to know what you stepped into. The weight of it settled on Sarah's shoulders. She'd thought this was about a hospital covering up incompetence, about petty administrators protecting their reputations. But if Connor was right, it went deeper. Money changing hands, safety violations ignored, workers hurt and abandoned to protect profits. And she'd walked right into the middle of it without knowing. Thank you for telling me, Sarah said quietly. Be careful. Connor's voice was serious. People who do this kind of thing don't just roll over because they got caught. They fight dirty. Sarah left the trauma center with her mind spinning. She sat in her car and called Torres. Where are you? Torres asked immediately. Just left the trauma center. Connor Walsh told me. I know what he told you. OSHA investigator called me an hour ago. Sarah, this is bigger than we thought. FBI's involved now. They're looking at a pattern. Bridger Construction has contracts with 4 different hospitals in the state. Every single one has had safety violations, cost overruns, and workers injured under suspicious circumstances. And Mercy Ridge? Right in the middle. They've got emails between Webb and Bridger executives discussing expediting approvals and managing complications. It reads like a playbook for fraud. Sarah closed her eyes. What does this mean for me? It means you're a witness in a federal investigation. It also means you're in danger. If the people behind this think you know too much or can connect too many dots, they'll come after you. They already did. The suspension, the charges, that was before federal investigators got involved. Now the stakes are higher. Sarah, I'm serious. Don't go home. Don't go to the hospital. Find somewhere safe and wait until I can get you proper protection. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm not running. This isn't about running. This is about staying alive long enough to testify. I'll be careful. Sarah ended the call. She knew Torres was right, knew the smart move was to disappear until the investigation wrapped up. But the smart move felt like surrender, felt like letting the same people who'd dismissed her and used her and tried to destroy her win again. Her phone rang. Monica. Sarah, where are you? Why? Because there are FBI agents at the hospital. They just arrested Administrator Rios, walked her out in handcuffs in front of everyone. It's chaos here. Sarah's breath caught. When? 20 minutes ago. They're searching her office now. Security's telling us to stay out of the administrative wing. Monica's voice dropped. Sarah, what the hell is going on? I can't explain right now. Just be careful. Don't talk to anyone about me, about the incident, about anything. If the FBI wants to interview you, call a lawyer first. You're scaring me. I'm scared too. I'll call you later. Sarah started driving. Not toward home, not toward the hospital, just driving, trying to think through the angles. If Rios was arrested, the hospital's leadership was collapsing. But who else was involved? How deep did the corruption run? Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Mercy Ridge Hospital. Administrator arrested in federal fraud investigation. FBI raids hospital offices. Then another, Bridger Construction CEO, taken into custody. Multi-state investigation underway. It was happening. The whole thing was coming down. Sarah pulled into a gas station and tried to steady her breathing. She'd wanted justice, wanted accountability. But this felt like watching a controlled demolition where she couldn't be sure the blast radius wouldn't include her. A black SUV pulled into the gas station behind her. Sarah's combat instincts fired. She watched in the rearview mirror as two men in suits got out. Federal agents, probably. Or worse. One of them approached her window. She kept the engine running. He held up a badge. FBI. Captain Brennan? Special Agent Michael Reeves, we need you to come with us. Am I under arrest? No, ma'am, but we have reason to believe you may be in danger. We'd like to move you to a secure location until we can ensure your safety. Sarah looked at the badge. It looked real, but so did a lot of things that weren't. I'll follow you in my own car. That's not advisable. Those are my terms. Reeves exchanged a glance with his partner. Fine. Stay close. We're going to a federal building downtown. You'll be safe there. They drove in convoy, the SUV leading, Sarah following. She kept her phone visible, ready to call 911 if the route deviated from what made sense. But they headed straight downtown, pulled into an underground garage beneath a building with Federal Bureau of Investigation carved into the stone facade. Real enough. Inside, they led her to a conference room. Coffee. Water. A female agent who introduced herself as Special Agent Karen Liu. Captain Brennan, thank you for cooperating. We know this is overwhelming. What exactly is happening? Liu sat across from her. For the past 8 months, the FBI has been investigating financial crimes in the healthcare and construction industries. Bridger Construction was on our radar. When Connor Walsh's accident occurred and we heard about the attempts to cover it up, we started looking at Mercy Ridge Hospital more closely. The emails that got leaked last week, those accelerated our timeline. The emails I leaked, the emails someone leaked, we don't know who. Liu's expression didn't change, but they gave us probable cause to move. We've arrested Patricia Rios, Derek Hastings from Bridger, and 3 other hospital executives. Dr. Marcus Webb is currently being questioned. What are the charges? Medicare fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice. And in Connor Walsh's case, we're looking at attempted criminally negligent homicide. Sarah absorbed that. Where do I fit in? You're a witness, potentially the most important witness we have. You saved Connor Walsh's life, which means he survived to tell his story. You exposed the hospital's pattern of retaliation and cost-cutting, and your military background makes you credible in ways that scare the defense. So you need me to testify? Eventually, yes. But right now we need you safe. We have evidence that suggests there may have been discussions about silencing you. Sarah's blood went cold. Discussions? Lou pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Sarah. An email thread appeared on screen. She recognized one of the names immediately, Patricia Rios. The other was someone listed as DH, Derek Hastings, presumably. Rios. Brennan is becoming a problem. The media attention is out of control. DH. Can you handle it? Rios. Working on it, but if she keeps digging, DH, then make sure she stops digging, permanently if necessary. Rios. That's not what I meant. DH. I know what you meant. I'll take care of it. The timestamp was 3 days ago. Sarah's hands went numb. They were planning to kill me. We don't know that for certain. Permanently could mean a lot of things. But we're not taking chances. Derek Hastings has a history. Assault charges that got dropped. Workers who filed complaints and then mysteriously withdrew them. We think he's been the muscle for this operation. Where is he now? In custody, but he made bail 2 hours ago. Sarah stood up. You arrested him and let him out? The judge set bail before we had all the evidence. We're working to revoke it, but he's out there right now knowing I'm the reason his whole operation is collapsing. Lou stood too. Which is why you're here. We can protect you, Captain, but you need to stay with us until we locate Hastings and ensure he's not a threat. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet, Captain. Now people are going to get hurt, starting with your friends at Mercy Ridge. Sarah showed the screen to Lou. The agent's face hardened. That's a direct threat. We need to trace this number. Lou called to someone outside the room. Get tech in here now. But Sarah was already moving toward the door. My friends are at the hospital. If he's threatening them, we'll send units to Mercy Ridge immediately. That's not fast enough. Lou stepped in front of her. Captain Brennan, if you leave this building, we can't protect you. Then don't. Sarah met her eyes. I'm not hiding while people I care about are in danger. This is exactly what Hastings wants. He's trying to draw you out. I know. Sarah's voice was flat, cold, the tone she'd used in combat zones when emotions became a liability. And it's going to work, because I'm not letting anyone else get hurt because of me. Lou studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. At least take this. Lou handed her a card with a number. Direct line. Anything happens, you call immediately. Sarah took the card and walked out of the federal building into the early evening light. Her car was still in the garage. She drove toward Mercy Ridge Hospital with her heart hammering and her hands steady on the wheel. Monica answered on the first ring. Sarah, thank God. Are you okay? Listen to me carefully. Get out of the hospital. Right now. Don't ask questions. Just leave. Tell Kelly. Tell anyone you trust. There's someone dangerous and he might be coming there. Sarah, what? Monica, please, trust me. Get out. Sarah heard rustling, rapid movement. Okay, I'm moving. What about the patients? Security will handle it. Just get yourself safe. Sarah was 10 minutes from the hospital when her phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Captain Brennan. The voice was male, rough, unfamiliar. You've been making my life very difficult. Derek Hastings. Good guess. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to meet me, alone, and you're going to tell the FBI you made a mistake, that you misunderstood what happened at the hospital, that there's no conspiracy. Or what? Or the night shift at Mercy Ridge has a very bad evening. I've got friends who owe me favors. One phone call, and things get ugly. Sarah's grip tightened on the wheel. You're bluffing. Am I? Let's find out. I'm giving you 30 minutes. There's a construction site on Maple and 5th, the Bridger job site where Walsh got hurt. You show up alone, we talk, and maybe nobody else gets hurt tonight. The FBI is listening to this call. No, they're not. This is a burner. Untraceable. 30 minutes, Captain. Or people start dying. The line went dead. Sarah pulled over and tried to think. This was a trap. Obviously a trap. Hastings knew she'd saved Connor Walsh, knew she had combat training, knew she wouldn't back down. He was counting on her walking into an ambush, but he was also counting on her caring more about protecting people than protecting herself. And he was right. Sarah checked the time. 7:42 p.m. She had 30 minutes to make a decision that would either end this or get her killed. She called Leo's direct line. Captain Brennan? Hastings just called. He wants to meet. Construction site, Maple and 5th. Says he'll hurt people at the hospital if I don't show. That's a trap. Don't go. I know it's a trap. Then why are you calling? Because I'm going anyway, and I need backup that won't spook him. Can you do that? Silence on the line. Then, how much time do we have? 28 minutes. Jesus, okay, we'll position agents around the perimeter, but Captain, if this goes wrong, there's only so much we can do. I know. Sarah drove toward the construction site with the clarity that only came in combat, the sense that everything was about to go very wrong, and the only thing that mattered was how you responded when it did. The site was dark when she arrived, just skeletal frameworks and piles of equipment silhouetted against the city lights. Sarah parked at the entrance and got out slowly, hands visible, phone in her pocket with the line to Lou still open. I'm here, she called into the darkness. Movement near the half-built structure. A figure emerged, tall, heavy build, moving with the casual confidence of someone who'd hurt people before and expected to do it again. Derek Hastings stepped into the light from a construction lamp. Captain Brennan, glad you could make it. Let's get this over with. Hastings smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. You really screwed things up, you know that? We had a good thing going. Hospitals get their buildings, we get paid, everybody wins. Then you had to go and be a hero. Connor Walsh almost died. Accidents happen. He knew the risks. You left him to die and covered it up. Prove it. Hastings took a step closer. Oh, wait. You can't. Because you're about to have an accident of your own. Tragic, really. Former Army surgeon, couldn't handle civilian life, came to a construction site late at night and fell. Such a shame. Sarah's combat instincts kicked in fully. She scanned the site, exits, cover, weapons. Saw another figure moving in the shadows behind Hastings. Maybe two. FBI's listening, Sarah said calmly. No, they're not. I checked. You're alone. And you're about to learn what happens to people who don't mind their own business. Hastings moved fast for a big man. He covered the distance between them in 3 strides. Swinging a piece of rebar like a club, Sarah ducked under it and drove her elbow into his ribs. The impact jolted up her arm, but Hastings barely flinched. He grabbed her shoulder and threw her backward into a pile of construction materials. Pain exploded through her back. Sarah rolled, came up in a crouch, and saw the second man approaching from the left. Younger, smaller, holding what looked like a nail gun. This was bad. Sarah grabbed a length of pipe from the debris and swung it hard at the younger man's knees. He went down screaming. Hastings charged again, and Sarah sidestepped, letting his momentum carry him past her before she brought the pipe down on his shoulder. He roared and spun, catching her across the face with a backhand that sent her sprawling. Blood filled her mouth. Stars exploded across her vision. She tried to get up, but Hastings was already on her, hands around her throat, squeezing. Should have stayed quiet, he growled. Sarah's vision started to tunnel. Her training screamed at her. Target the eyes, the throat, anything vulnerable. She drove her thumbs into Hastings' eye sockets hard enough to make him release her. He staggered back, cursing. Sarah gasped for air and scrambled away. Then she heard it. The sound of vehicles approaching fast, tires on gravel, the sharp bark of federal agents shouting commands. Hastings heard it too. His face twisted with rage, and he lunged at Sarah one more time, going for the pipe she'd dropped. Sarah was faster. She kicked his knee hard enough to hyperextend it, and he went down screaming. FBI agents swarmed the site, flashlights, weapons drawn, shouting for everyone to get on the ground. Sarah collapsed against a concrete pillar, chest heaving, blood running from her split lip. Lou appeared beside her. You okay? Define okay? Can you walk? Yeah. Lou helped her up. Across the site, agents were cuffing Hastings and his associate. Hastings was still screaming threats, still promising that Sarah was dead, that this wasn't over. But his voice was fading as they dragged him away. Lou looked at Sarah. That was the stupidest brave thing I've ever seen. Did you get it on recording? Every word, every threat. He just confessed to conspiracy and attempted murder on tape. Sarah's legs felt weak. The adrenaline was fading and the pain was taking its place. Her back, her face, her throat where Hastings' hands had squeezed. I need to sit down. Ambulance is on the way. Sarah shook her head. I need to check on the hospital, make sure Monica and the others are safe. Already done. We had units there the moment Hastings made his threat. Everyone's secure. Sarah let herself lean against the pillar. Let the weight of the last week, the last 6 months, settle over her like a physical thing. She'd wanted justice. She'd gotten war. But she'd also gotten the truth. And sometimes that was the same thing. Lou's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression changed. "Sarah, you need to see this." She held up the phone. A news alert. Federal raids expand. 6 hospitals, 12 construction executives arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud ring. Below that, Mercy Ridge whistleblower identified as decorated combat veteran. Her story changes everything. And below that, breaking. Hospital board votes emergency resolution to remove entire executive leadership. Sarah read the headlines twice, then a third time. "It's over," Lou said quietly. But Sarah knew better, because her phone was buzzing with a new message. From a number she recognized this time, the Mercy Ridge Hospital main line. The text was simple: emergency board meeting, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Your presence is requested. We need to discuss your future with this hospital. Sarah looked at the construction site around her. The broken rebar, the blood on the ground, the flashing lights of FBI vehicles. Then she looked at Lou. "It's not over," Sarah said. "It's just beginning." Sarah spent the night in a federal safe house, a sterile apartment with generic furniture and windows that didn't open. An agent stayed posted outside her door. Lou had insisted, said Hastings had associates who might not know he'd been arrested yet. Said Sarah needed protection until the full scope of the conspiracy was clear. Sarah didn't sleep. Her throat ached where Hastings had choked her, bruises already blooming purple across her neck. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, felt his hand squeezing, heard his voice promising she was dead. But she was alive. And at 9 a.m., she had a meeting with the people who'd spent 6 months trying to make her disappear. At 7:30 a.m., Captain Torres arrived with coffee and a briefcase full of documents. "You look like hell," Torres said. "Feel worse." Sarah's voice was rough, her throat raw. Torres set the briefcase on the table and pulled out a stack of papers. "The board meeting this morning isn't what you think. I've been in contact with the interim chair, a guy named Lawrence Hendricks, brought in from the state medical board after the arrests. He wants to offer you something." "What kind of something?" A position. Director of Emergency Services. Full authority over ER operations, staffing, protocols. Basically everything web-controlled, you'd control instead." Sarah stared at her. "They want to promote me. They want to save face. Federal investigators are crawling through every document, every email, every decision made in the last 3 years. The hospital's reputation is destroyed. They need someone clean, someone credible, someone the public trusts." Torres met her eyes. "They need you? And if I say no, then you walk away and let them burn, which is also a valid choice." Sarah picked up the coffee but didn't drink it. Her hands were steadier than they should have been. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should ask yourself what you want, not what's fair, not what's just. What do you actually want from all this?" Sarah looked at the bruises on her wrists from where she'd hit the construction debris. Thought about Connor Walsh almost dying because people cared more about money than safety. Thought about Monica and Kelly and every other nurse who'd been told to shut up and accept conditions they knew were dangerous. "I want it to be different," Sarah said quietly. "I want the next person who sees something wrong to be able to speak up without getting destroyed for it. Then take the job. Change it from the inside. Or become part of the problem." Torres shrugged. "That's the risk. But Sarah, you've been fighting this fight for 6 months without any authority. Imagine what you could do with actual power." Sarah arrived at Mercy Ridge Hospital at 8:45 a.m. The parking lot was half empty. Word had spread about the arrests and people were staying away. The few staff members Sarah passed in the hallways looked shell-shocked, moving through their routines like sleepwalkers. The boardroom was on the 5th floor, all mahogany and leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 7 people sat around the conference table. Sarah recognized 2 from news footage, hospital board members who'd survived the purge. The others were strangers wearing the kind of expensive suits that meant lawyers or state officials. Lawrence Hendricks sat at the head of the table. He was 60-something, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades navigating bureaucracy. He stood when Sarah entered. "Captain Brennan, thank you for coming. Please sit." Sarah sat. Torres took the chair beside her. Hendricks folded his hands on the table. "I'll be direct. Mercy Ridge Hospital is in crisis. We've lost our administrator, our chief of emergency services, and 3 department heads to federal charges. Our reputation is in ruins. Patient admissions are down 40%. Staff morale is non-existent. We're hemorrhaging money and trust. Not my problem, Sarah said. One of the board members, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Actually, Captain Brennan, you are the only thing keeping this hospital from complete collapse. The public sees you as a hero. The media is calling you a whistleblower who exposed corruption. You're the only person associated with Mercy Ridge who comes out of this looking good. So you want to use me? Hendricks didn't flinch. Yes. We want to offer you the position of Director of Emergency Services, full operational control of the ER. Salary commensurate with the role, substantially more than you were making as a staff nurse, and the authority to implement whatever changes you believe are necessary. Sarah looked around the table. And in exchange, you stay. You rebuild. You help us prove that Mercy Ridge can be better than what it was. Why would I do that? The sharp-eyed woman spoke again. Because walking away doesn't fix anything. The corruption is gone, but the hospital remains. The patients who need us still need us. And frankly, Captain Brennan, you don't strike me as someone who walks away from a fight. Sarah's jaw tightened. You don't know me. I know you stayed in the ER during an active threat when everyone else ran. I know you saved a man's life and then refused to back down when the institution tried to destroy you for it. I know you walked into a trap last night knowing you might die because you wouldn't let anyone else get hurt. The woman's expression softened slightly. So no, I don't know you personally, but I know enough. Hendricks slid a document across the table. This is the offer. Take your time reviewing it. But Captain Brennan, we need an answer today. The state medical board is deciding whether to pull our operating license. If we can show them we're taking corrective action, that we're bringing in leadership with integrity, we have a chance to survive this. If not, he didn't finish the sentence. Sarah picked up the document. The salary number made her blink. The benefits were generous. The authority was real. Personnel decisions, budget allocation, operational protocols, all under her control. It was everything she should want. Torres leaned close and whispered, "This is a good offer. Better than you'll get anywhere else." Sarah set the document down. "I have conditions." Hendricks nodded. "Name them." "Full transparency. Every decision I make, every policy I implement gets published publicly. No more hiding problems to protect the hospital's image." "Agreed." "Independent safety audits, monthly, conducted by outside agencies with no financial ties to Mercy Ridge." "Agreed." "And I want a seat on the hospital board, non-voting but present at every meeting. I want to see the decisions being made at the top." Hendricks exchanged glances with the other board members. The sharp-eyed woman nodded. "Agreed," Hendricks said. "Anything else?" Sarah thought about Monica texting her in the middle of chaos, about Kelly's frightened face, about every nurse who'd been told to do more with less and keep quiet about it. "I want whistleblower protections formalized. Any staff member who reports safety concerns gets immunity from retaliation, and I want it in writing, part of every employment contract." "Done." Hendricks pulled out a pen. "Do we have a deal, Captain Brennan?" Sarah looked at Torres. The lawyer gave a small nod. "One more thing," Sarah said. "I want a public apology from the board for what happened. Not to me, to every staff member who was silenced, every patient who was put at risk, every person who suffered because this hospital chose profits over people." The room went quiet. One of the board members, a younger man who hadn't spoken yet, cleared his throat. "That could expose us to liability." "I don't care about your liability," Sarah interrupted. "You want me to help save this hospital? Then own what it did wrong, publicly, or find someone else." Hendricks studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "We'll draft a statement. It'll go out this afternoon." "Then we have a deal." Sarah signed the contract. Torres countersigned as witness. When it was done, Hendricks stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to leadership, Director Brennan." Sarah shook his hand. It felt like stepping off a cliff. The news broke within the hour. Local channels ran the story first. Mercy Ridge names whistleblower nurse as new director of emergency services. Then it went regional, then national. By noon, Sarah's phone was flooded with interview requests, congratulations, and a surprising number of job offers from other hospitals. She ignored most of them, but she did answer when Monica called. "Director Brennan," Monica said, and Sarah could hear the smile in her voice. "Holy shit, Sarah. Don't call me that. Too late. Everyone's calling you that. The ER is going crazy. Half the staff is celebrating, the other half is terrified you're going to fire them. I'm not firing anyone, unless they give me a reason." "What about Webb's people? The ones who went along with everything?" Sarah had been thinking about that. Webb had resigned before the arrests, disappeared into whatever hole disgraced doctors disappeared into. But his influence remained. Supervisors who'd enforced his policies, nurses who'd reported colleagues for speaking up, staff who'd chosen safety over integrity. "We'll see," Sarah said. "First, I need to understand what actually happened. Who knew what? Who was scared? Who was complicit? When do you start?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. "That's fast." "The board wants immediate action. Show the public we're changing." Monica was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, be careful. Just because you have authority now doesn't mean the people who were part of this are gone. Some of them are still here, and they're not going to like what you represent. Let them not like it. I'm serious. You just destroyed their entire operation. They lost money, lost jobs. Some of them are facing criminal charges. People like that don't just accept it and move on." Sarah thought about Hastings's hands around her throat, his promise that this wasn't over. "I'll be careful." But careful wasn't the same as safe. That evening, Sarah met with Jake Cordero for the interview she'd promised. They sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital, camera crew visible through the window, passers-by slowing to watch. Cordero set up a recorder between them. "Ready?" "Yeah. Let's start with the obvious question. A week ago, you were suspended and facing criminal charges. Today, you're the director of emergency services. How does that feel?" Sarah thought about it. Surreal. Exhausting. Necessary. Necessary? Someone needs to fix what's broken. Might as well be someone who's seen how bad it was. "You've been critical of hospital administration. Now you are hospital administration. Worried about becoming what you fought against? Every day." Sarah met his eyes. "But the difference is, I know what I'm worried about. I know the warning signs, and I know what happens when you ignore them." Cordero leaned forward. "Let's talk about that night. Connor Walsh came through those ER doors, and everyone ran except you. Why didn't you run?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, choosing her words. "I spent 6 years in places where running got people killed. You learn to move toward the crisis, not away from it. That doesn't make me special. It just makes me trained. But the hospital didn't value that training. They treated you like, and I'm quoting from an internal email here, a disruptive element. They treated me like I didn't matter, like my experience was irrelevant because I wasn't in the right position or didn't have the right title. That's what happens when institutions care more about hierarchy than competence. And now you're at the top of that hierarchy. Now I'm in a position to change it, or try to." The interview went on for 40 minutes. Cordero asked about the FBI investigation, about Derek Hastings, about what Sarah planned to do differently. She answered honestly, probably too honestly, Torres would say later, but she was done with careful political answers. When it was over, Cordero shut off the recorder. "Off the record. You know some people are going to come after you for this, right? You just humiliated a lot of powerful people. They're not going to forget. Let them come." Cordero smiled slightly. "You really mean that?" "I really do." That night, Sarah returned to her apartment for the first time in 3 days. The FBI had cleared it. No threats, no signs of tampering. But it felt different now, smaller, like she'd outgrown it in the span of a week. She made coffee and sat on the couch, trying to prepare for tomorrow. She'd start with staff meetings, talk to every nurse and doctor and tech who worked in the ER, figure out who to trust, who to watch, who to rebuild with. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the promotion, Director. Some advice. Watch your back. Not everyone who smiles at you tomorrow is your friend." Sarah stared at the message, deleted it, but the words stayed with her. She managed 4 hours of sleep, then woke at 5 a.m. and dressed in clean scrubs. Torres had suggested a suit. "Your administration now." But Sarah refused. She was still a nurse, still someone who worked with her hands. The title didn't change that. She arrived at Mercy Ridge at 6:30 a.m. The ER was quiet, night shift winding down. A few staff members saw her and their expressions shifted: surprise, respect, something that might have been fear. Sarah found the office that used to be Webb's. Someone had already put her name on the door: Director Sarah Brennan, Emergency Services. Inside, the desk was clean, the computer logged out, everything sterile and waiting. She sat in the chair and it felt wrong. Too big. Too removed from the actual work. A knock at the door. Monica stood there with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. You have no idea. Sarah took the coffee gratefully. Monica sat in the chair across from the desk. So, Director, what's the first move? Sarah had been thinking about that all night. Staff meeting, everyone who works in this ER. I want to hear what they have to say. Some of them won't be honest with you. Not yet. You're still the person who got their bosses arrested. Then we'll start building trust, one conversation at a time. And the ones who were part of it, the ones who reported people for speaking up, who enforced Webb's policies even when they knew it was wrong. Sarah looked at Monica. Did you ever report anyone? Monica flushed. No, but I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. We all did. Then we all start over, clean slate. But anyone who continues that pattern, anyone who retaliates or punishes people for raising concerns, they're gone. The morning shift arrived. Sarah held the staff meeting in the main ER conference room, standing at the front while 37 nurses, doctors, and techs filed in. Some looked hopeful. Some looked scared. A few looked openly hostile. Richard Ortiz, the day shift supervisor, sat in the back with his arms crossed. Sarah waited until everyone was settled. I'm not going to give you a speech about how everything's going to be perfect now. It's not. This hospital is damaged. Trust is broken. Some of you are angry at me for what happened. Some of you are relieved. Most of you probably don't know what to think. She paused. Nobody spoke. Here's what I know. The people who ran this place cared more about money than patients. They silenced anyone who pointed out problems. They punished people for doing the right thing. And Connor Walsh almost died because of it. Sarah's voice hardened. That ends now. Not slowly. Not eventually. Now. One of the newer nurses raised her hand tentatively. What does that actually mean? It means if you see something unsafe, you report it, and I listen. It means we staff properly, even if it costs more. It means we don't cut corners to make budget numbers look good. And it means anyone who retaliates against whistleblowers gets fired immediately. Ortiz spoke from the back. Easy to say. Harder to do when the board's breathing down your neck about costs. The board gave me operational control. They want this ER fixed, and they know that costs money. I'll handle them. You focus on patients. Another nurse, an older woman named Susan, who'd worked at Mercy Ridge for 20 years, stood slowly. Dr. Webb used to say the same things. At first. Then the pressure came and everything changed. How do we know you won't do the same? It was a fair question. Sarah met her eyes. You don't. Not yet. All you have is my word that I'll try. And if I fail, you hold me accountable the same way I'm holding everyone else accountable. Deal? Susan studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded and sat down. The meeting went on for another hour. Sarah laid out immediate changes. New staffing ratios, mandatory safety reviews, an open-door policy for concerns. Some people pushed back, some asked good questions. A few stayed silent, watching. When it was over, most of the staff filtered out. But Kelly approached Sarah near the door. Thank you, Kelly said quietly, for fighting back, for not just taking it when they tried to destroy you. I didn't do it alone. Yeah, but you started it. That matters. After Kelly left, Sarah stood alone in the conference room, looking at the empty chairs, the whiteboard still marked with Webb's old protocols. Monica appeared in the doorway. You handled that well. Did I? Half of them don't trust me yet. They will, or they won't. Either way, you gave them something Webb never did, honesty. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Special Agent Liu. Need to see you. Something's come up with the investigation. Can you come to the federal building this afternoon? Sarah showed the message to Monica. This can't be good. Want me to come with you? No, stay here. Keep an eye on things. Sarah met Lou at 2 p.m. in the same conference room where she'd been briefed 3 days earlier. This time, Lou wasn't alone. A federal prosecutor sat beside her, a woman in her 40s with the kind of sharp intelligence that made Sarah's instincts prickle. Director Brennan, Lou said, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Vance. She's prosecuting the Mercy Ridge case. Vance shook Sarah's hand. Thank you for coming. We need to discuss your testimony. I already gave a statement. And it's solid, but we've uncovered something new, something that changes the scope of the case. Vance pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Sarah. Does the name Catherine Brennan mean anything to you? Sarah's blood went cold. That's my mother. She worked at Mercy Ridge Hospital 26 years ago, nursing supervisor. She died when I was 8, cancer. Vance's expression was carefully neutral. Captain Brennan, we've been reviewing historical records as part of the fraud investigation. We found discrepancies in billing and patient care going back decades, and your mother's name appears in several documents flagging concerns about financial irregularities. Sarah couldn't breathe. What are you saying? We think your mother tried to expose fraud at Mercy Ridge Hospital in 1999, and we think the hospital buried her complaints. Vance paused. 3 months after she filed her last internal report, she was diagnosed with aggressive lymphoma. She died 6 months later. You think they killed her? We think it's a hell of a coincidence that a whistleblower dies from a rare cancer shortly after threatening the hospital's revenue stream. Vance leaned forward. Sarah, did your mother ever mention problems at work? Anything about concerns she raised? Sarah's mind was reeling. She remembered her mother working long hours, remembered tension at home, remembered her father shouting about the hospital not covering medical bills even though her mother had worked there for 15 years. She used to say the hospital cared more about paperwork than patients, Sarah said slowly. I thought she just meant bureaucracy. I was 8. I didn't understand. Lou spoke gently. Sarah, we can't prove the hospital caused your mother's illness, but we can prove they ignored her warnings and retaliated by reducing her benefits and blocking her insurance claims. That's part of the pattern, and it means you have a personal connection to this case that goes deeper than we realized. Sarah stood up. The room felt too small, the walls too close. I need air. She walked out into the hallway, her heart hammering. 24 years. Her mother had been dead for 24 years, and Sarah had never known she'd been a whistleblower, never known she'd fought the same fight Sarah was fighting now. Vance followed her out. I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming doesn't cover it. But Sarah, this could be important. If we can show that Mercy Ridge has been retaliating against whistleblowers for decades, it strengthens our case. It shows pattern, intent, institutional corruption that goes beyond a few bad actors. Sarah turned to face her. You want to use my mother's death to prosecute the hospital. I want to use the truth to get justice. For your mother, for Connor Walsh, for everyone who got hurt because Mercy Ridge put money first. Sarah closed her eyes, thought about her mother's tired smile, her dedication to her patients, the way she'd kept working even when she could barely stand. What do you need from me? Sarah asked. Any documents from that time period, medical records, employment files, anything your family kept, and your testimony about what you remember. I was 8 years old. Sometimes the smallest details matter. Sarah agreed to search her father's house. He still lived in the same place, kept boxes of her mother's things in the attic. But driving there felt like walking back into a past she'd spent years trying to escape. Her father answered the door looking older than Sarah remembered. He'd aged badly after her mother died, never remarried, worked construction until his back gave out. Sarah wasn't expecting you. Hi, Dad. Can I come in? They sat in the living room that hadn't changed in 2 decades. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls. Sarah's mother smiled from a dozen frozen moments. I need to ask you something, Sarah said, about Mom, about when she worked at Mercy Ridge. Her father's expression shifted. Why? The FBI is investigating the hospital. They think Mom tried to report fraud and the hospital retaliated. Her father was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and left the room. He came back carrying a cardboard box, worn at the edges, taped shut. After your mother died, I boxed up her work things. Never could bring myself to look through it. He set the box on the coffee table. Always felt like the hospital killed her. Not the cancer, the stress, the fighting, the way they treated her at the end, but I couldn't prove anything. I was just a construction worker. Who was going to listen to me? Sarah opened the box. Inside were files, letters, performance reviews. And there, near the bottom, a stack of internal memos marked confidential. Sarah read the top one. Her mother's handwriting, clear and precise, documented evidence of upcoding in emergency services. Patients billed for procedures not performed. Estimated $400,000 in fraudulent Medicare, claims over 6 months. Recommend immediate audit and corrective action. The response stamped 2 weeks later. Recommendation denied. No evidence of systemic fraud. Consider this matter closed. Sarah's hands shook as she read through the rest. Memo after memo. Her mother flagging problems, requesting investigations, demanding action. And memo after memo, the hospital shutting her down. The final document was a letter terminating her mother's health insurance benefits for administrative irregularities, dated 3 weeks after her cancer diagnosis. "They killed her," Sarah whispered. Her father's voice was rough. "I always knew. Just couldn't prove it." Sarah took the box. Drove back to the federal building with her mother's documents on the passenger seat. Vance and Lou reviewed everything with the kind of careful attention that said they understood what they were seeing. "This is enough," Vance said finally. "Combined with the current case, this proves institutional pattern. Mercy Ridge has been doing this for at least 25 years. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we destroy them properly." The news broke the next morning. Federal prosecutors expand charges. Mercy Ridge fraud dates back decades. Whistleblower died after hospital retaliation. And beneath that, new director's mother was first victim, Catherine Brennan. Tried to stop the corruption 25 years ago. Sarah's phone exploded again. But this time the calls were different. Former Mercy Ridge employees from years ago, people who'd left or been forced out, people who'd seen things and stayed silent because they didn't think anyone would listen. One call came from a doctor who'd worked with Sarah's mother. "I remember Catherine," he said. "She was brilliant, dedicated, and they destroyed her for telling the truth. I left Mercy Ridge 6 months after she died because I couldn't stomach what they'd done. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for her." "It's not too late," Sarah said. "Talk to the FBI. Help us prove what happened." He did. And so did 7 others who came forward with stories spanning 2 decades. The case against Mercy Ridge stopped being about one hospital's recent corruption and became something larger, a systemic pattern of abuse that had destroyed careers, endangered patients, and now, possibly, contributed to Sarah's mother's death. Sarah stood in her new office looking at a picture of her mother she'd brought from her father's house, young, smiling, wearing scrubs, standing in front of Mercy Ridge Hospital like she was proud to work there. "I'm finishing what you started," Sarah said to the photograph. Her phone rang. Lawrence Hendricks. "Director Brennan, we need to talk. The new charges are... The board is concerned about the hospital's survival. Should have thought about that 25 years ago. This isn't about defending what happened. But Sarah, if Mercy Ridge closes, 60,000 people lose their hospital. Hundreds of staff lose jobs. Is that really justice?" Sarah thought about Connor Walsh, almost dying. About her mother working herself to exhaustion trying to fix a corrupt system. About every person who'd been silenced or destroyed for doing the right thing. "Justice is making sure it never happens again," Sarah said, "whether Mercy Ridge survives or not." She ended the call. Because Sarah had just realized something. The board hadn't hired her to fix the hospital. They'd hired her to be the friendly face while they tried to survive the investigation, and she was about to prove she was nobody's puppet. Sarah walked into the next board meeting without knocking. It was 8 a.m. on a Thursday, 3 days after she'd discovered the board's real intentions, and she was done playing their game. Lawrence Hendricks looked up from the head of the table, surprised. "Director Brennan, we weren't expecting you until..." "I resign." The room went silent. 7 board members stared at her like she'd just announced the building was on fire. "Excuse me," Hendricks said carefully. "You heard me. I'm resigning as Director of Emergency Services, effective immediately." Sarah pulled the letter from her pocket and dropped it on the table. "You didn't hire me to fix this hospital. You hired me to be a shield while you try to survive the investigation. I'm not interested in being anyone's PR strategy." The sharp-eyed woman, Margaret Chen, Sarah had learned her name, leaned forward. "That's not fair. We gave you everything you asked for, full authority, budget control. And the first time I recommended closing the ER for 48 hours to do a complete safety audit, you blocked it. Said it would send the wrong message to the community. Sarah's voice was flat. You want the appearance of change without actual change. I'm not doing that. Hendricks stood slowly. Captain Brennan, please, sit down. Let's discuss this. There's nothing to discuss. This hospital has been corrupt for 25 years. My mother tried to stop it, and it killed her. I'm not going to waste my time pretending you're suddenly interested in doing the right thing when the real goal is just surviving long enough to avoid criminal charges. That's not... Hendricks stopped, seemed to reconsider. What do you want from us? I want you to do what you should have done in 1999. Admit the hospital's been broken. Fire everyone involved in the cover-up, not just the ones who got arrested. Bring in outside management. Let the state take over if necessary. Stop trying to save an institution that doesn't deserve to be saved. One of the younger board members, a man Sarah didn't know, cleared his throat. If we do that, Mercy Ridge closes. Permanently. You understand that? Then it closes. Sarah met his eyes. Better that than continuing to hurt people while pretending to care about them. Margaret stood. You're willing to destroy 600 jobs and leave 60,000 people without a nearby hospital because you want revenge? I want accountability. There's a difference. Is there? Margaret's voice sharpened. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to make a lot of innocent people suffer to satisfy your anger. Sarah felt the hit land. She thought about Monica and Kelly, about every nurse and tech and janitor who worked at Mercy Ridge through no fault of their own. People who needed those jobs, who served their community, who'd done nothing wrong except work for a corrupt institution. You're right, Sarah said quietly. They don't deserve to suffer. But they also don't deserve to keep working in a place that's fundamentally broken. So here's my offer. I'll stay. But only if you agree to a complete independent audit by the state medical board. Full access to everything. Finances, operations, personnel files going back 25 years. And when they find what we all know they're going to find, you agree to whatever corrective action they recommend, including closure if that's what they decide. Hendricks sat down heavily. You're asking us to cooperate in our own destruction. I'm asking you to finally put patients before profits. One time, after a quarter-century of doing the opposite. The board members looked at each other. Whispered conversations. Tense glances. Finally, Hendricks spoke. We need time to discuss this. You have 1 hour. After that, I'm walking out and I'm telling every reporter in the state exactly why. Sarah turned to leave, then stopped. And just so we're clear, I'm recording this conversation, so don't waste your time trying to spin it later. She walked out and headed straight to the ER. Monica was at the nurse's station and took one look at Sarah's face. What happened? I might have just quit, or I might have just saved this place. Hard to say which. Sarah, they've got an hour to decide if they're willing to actually change or if they just want to keep playing pretend. Monica grabbed her arm. And if they choose wrong, then we all find new jobs, but at least we'll know we didn't participate in a lie. 53 minutes later, Sarah's phone rang. Hendricks. We accept your terms. The state medical board will have full access starting Monday. We'll cooperate completely. Put it in writing, email it to me, and copy the Attorney General's office. I want it on record. Done. Sarah ended the call and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Monica was watching from across the ER. They agreed? Monica asked. They agreed. So what now? Now we find out if this hospital can actually be fixed. The state audit took 6 weeks. Teams of investigators crawled through every department, every file, every decision made in the last 25 years. They interviewed hundreds of current and former employees. They reviewed patient outcomes, safety records, billing practices. Sarah cooperated fully. She gave them access to her mother's documents. She testified about what she'd witnessed during her 6 months as a staff nurse. She didn't protect anyone. The findings were released on a Tuesday morning. Sarah read them in her office with Monica standing behind her shoulder. The report was devastating. Systematic fraud dating back to 1997. Safety violations in every department. Staffing ratios manipulated to increase profits. Whistleblowers silenced through intimidation and retaliation. At least 16 employees who'd raised concerns and subsequently left or been fired. And Catherine Brennan's name mentioned 12 times as the first person to formally document the corruption. The state's recommendation was clear. Dissolve the current board, install interim management, and place Mercy Ridge Hospital under state oversight for a minimum of 3 years. If performance didn't improve, consider closure and reassignment of services to neighboring facilities. Sarah's phone rang within minutes. Hendricks, his voice strained. The board is meeting tonight. We're voting to accept the state's terms. Good. Sarah, I need you to know some of us didn't know. About your mother, about how deep this went. We thought we were managing a recent problem, not participating in decades of corruption. Does that make you less responsible? Silence. Then, no, I suppose it doesn't. That evening, Mercy Ridge Hospital held a public meeting. The auditorium was packed. Staff, patients, community members, reporters. Sarah sat in the front row with Monica on one side and Captain Torres on the other. Lawrence Hendricks stood at the podium looking 20 years older than he had 6 weeks ago. The State Medical Board has completed its audit of Mercy Ridge Hospital. The findings are damning. This institution has failed its patients, its staff, and this community for far longer than any of us realized. He paused, hands gripping the podium. Effective immediately, the Board of Directors is dissolving. We are accepting the state's recommendation for oversight and interim management. And I want to publicly apologize to Catherine Brennan, whose warnings in 1999 should have been heeded, and to her daughter Sarah, who had to finish the fight her mother started. Every eye in the room turned to Sarah. Hendricks continued. I also want to apologize to every employee who was silenced, every patient who was put at risk, and every person who suffered because this hospital chose profit over care. There is no excuse. There is no justification. We failed, and we're sorry. The apology hung in the air. Some people nodded, others looked skeptical. A few were crying. Then Connor Walsh stood up from the back of the room, still using a cane to walk. I want to say something. Hendricks stepped aside. Connor limped to the front, his sister Amy supporting him. He turned to face the crowd. A lot of you know my story. I almost died because people at this hospital didn't care enough to do their jobs right. But one person did care. Sarah Brennan saved my life when everyone else ran. And then she fought to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. His voice got rough. I'm a Marine. I know what courage looks like. And what Sarah did. Standing up when she had everything to lose. Refusing to back down when they tried to destroy her. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen outside of combat. The applause started slowly, then built. Sarah felt her face flush. She wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. Wasn't comfortable with praise. But Connor wasn't finished. The hospital tried to make her the villain. Called her violent, said she used excessive force. But I was there. I remember. And she didn't hurt me. She saved me. So I want everyone here to know, Sarah Brennan is the reason I'm alive, and this community owes her a debt we can never repay. The applause became a standing ovation. Sarah stood because staying seated felt wrong, but she didn't know what to do with her hands or where to look. Monica whispered beside her, just take it. You earned this. After the meeting, people approached Sarah in clusters. Former patients thanking her, nurses telling her they'd felt the same problems but didn't know how to speak up. Community members who'd lost family members to medical errors and now wondered if corruption had played a role. One older man waited until the crowd thinned. He had the weathered look of someone who'd worked with his hands his whole life. You don't know me, he said. Name's Robert Brennan. I'm your uncle, your mother's brother. Sarah stared at him. She'd known her mother had a brother but hadn't seen him since the funeral 24 years ago. I should have stayed in touch, Robert continued. After Catherine died, your father and I, we had a falling out. About the hospital, about whether to push for an investigation. I wanted to fight. He wanted to move on. We both handled grief badly. Why are you here now? Because I watched the news, saw what you did, and I realized you're exactly like your mother. Same fire, same refusal to accept wrong just because it's easier than fighting. His eyes got wet. Catherine would be so proud of you. I needed you to know that. Sarah's throat tightened. I wish I'd known her better. Really known her. She was brilliant, stubborn as hell. Wouldn't back down from anything she thought was wrong. Got her in trouble constantly. Robert smiled slightly. Just like someone else I know. They talked for 20 minutes. Robert shared stories about Catherine as a young nurse, about her dedication, about the way she'd fight for patients no one else cared about. By the time he left, Sarah had his phone number and a promise to stay in touch. Captain Torres approached as Sarah was gathering her things. "Hell of a night." "Yeah. The state's interim management team wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're offering you the director position again, under the new structure." Sarah had been expecting this. "What did you tell them?" "That you'd think about it." "But, Sarah, this time it's different. Real oversight, real accountability, real chance to build something better. Or it's just another version of the same broken system." Torres shrugged. "Maybe, but you'll never know if you don't try." Sarah met with the interim management team the next morning. They were state medical officials, brought in specifically because they had no ties to Mercy Ridge's previous administration. Professional, serious, focused on patient care over politics. The lead administrator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hayes, who'd turned around 2 failing hospitals in other states, got straight to the point. "We want you as Director of Emergency Services. Not as a figurehead, not as PR, as the person who actually runs the department and makes it work. Full authority, full support, full transparency. The question is whether you trust us enough to try." Sarah thought about her mother's documents, about Connor Walsh's near death, about every person who'd been silenced or hurt or killed by an institution that forgot why it existed. "I have conditions," Sarah said. "Name them. Monthly public reporting on safety metrics, staffing ratios, and patient outcomes. No hiding problems." "Agreed. Formal whistleblower protections in every employment contract with financial penalties for retaliation." "Agreed. And I want a memorial. For Catherine Brennan and every other person who tried to stop this and got destroyed for it. Their names public. Their stories told. So we never forget what happens when institutions value profit over people." Dr. Hayes was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. "We'll build it, in the main lobby. Prominent. Permanent. Then I'll take the job." 3 months later, Mercy Ridge Hospital reopened under new management. The changes were visible immediately: increased staffing, new safety protocols, transparent reporting. The ER that had been chaotic and understaffed was now properly resourced. Patient satisfaction scores climbed. Staff turnover decreased. Sarah stood in the main lobby on the day they unveiled the memorial, a wall of bronze plaques listing names. Catherine Brennan's was first, followed by 15 others who'd raised concerns over 25 years. Beneath the names, an inscription: "In memory of those who spoke truth to power and paid the price. May their courage remind us that integrity matters more than image, and people matter more than profit." Her father stood beside her, quiet and steady. Robert was there too, along with Monica, Kelly, Torres, and Connor Walsh, walking without his cane now, nearly fully recovered. Connor placed flowers at the base of the memorial. "Your mother started something important. You finished it. That matters." Sarah looked at her mother's name etched in bronze. She shouldn't have had to fight alone. "Neither should you," Monica said. "But you did anyway, and you won." The local news covered the memorial dedication. Jake Cordero interviewed Sarah one more time. Looking back on everything that happened, the suspension, the charges, the investigation, all of it, would you do anything differently? Sarah thought about it. "I'd speak up sooner. The day I started at Mercy Ridge, I saw problems. Stayed quiet because I didn't want to make waves. If I'd said something 6 months earlier, maybe things would have changed before Connor Walsh got hurt. You think you could have prevented his accident? I think silence enables corruption. And I stayed silent too long." "But you didn't stay silent forever." "No. Eventually I remembered what my training taught me. You move toward the crisis, not away from it. Fear makes people run. Courage makes you stay." The interview aired that evening. By morning, Sarah had received calls from 3 other hospitals across the state asking for consultation on building whistleblower protection programs. The state medical board wanted her input on new regulations. A nursing school asked her to speak to graduating students about professional integrity. Sarah accepted some offers and declined others. Because she'd learned something through all of this. Being visible meant being vulnerable, and she needed to choose her battles carefully. But she also learned that staying invisible meant letting wrong things continue, and she was done with that. 6 months after taking the director position, Sarah received a package. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter and a photograph. The letter was from a nurse who'd worked at Mercy Ridge in the early 2000s. She'd witnessed the retaliation against Catherine Brennan, had seen her benefits cut and her complaints ignored, had wanted to speak up but stayed quiet out of fear. "I've carried that guilt for 23 years," the letter read. "Watching what you did, how you refused to stay silent even when it cost you everything, made me realize I'd made the wrong choice. I'm testifying now, adding my story to the record. It won't bring your mother back, but maybe it helps prove she was right." The photograph showed Sarah's mother at a staff meeting, standing at a whiteboard covered in notes about patient safety protocols. She looked determined, focused, alive in a way Sarah barely remembered. Sarah pinned the photograph to her office wall, a reminder of where she came from and why it mattered. That night, Sarah sat in the ER during a quiet moment between patients. Monica was doing paperwork nearby. Kelly was restocking supplies. The rhythm of the department hummed around them, steady, controlled, safe. "You ever regret it?" Monica asked without looking up. "Taking this job instead of walking away?" Sarah thought about it. "Every day, and never." "That doesn't make sense." "Doesn't have to. It's true anyway." Sarah stood and stretched. "Regret because it's hard and exhausting, and I'll never fix everything that's broken. Never, because I know it matters." An ambulance call came over the radio. Trauma incoming, multiple patients, car accident on the highway. Sarah moved automatically, pulling on gloves, calling for the trauma team, preparing the bay. The old fear tried to surface, the worry that she'd missed something, that someone would die because she wasn't good enough, fast enough, smart enough. But she pushed it down. Because fear didn't save lives, training did, experience did. The willingness to step forward when others stepped back. The ambulance doors burst open and paramedics wheeled in the first patient, a teenager, unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. Sarah's hands moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Get me a trauma panel and prep for intubation. Kelly, start 2 large-bore IVs. Monica, call neurosurgery." They worked in synchronized precision, the kind of teamwork that only came from trust and proper training and adequate staffing, the kind of emergency care that should have been standard at Mercy Ridge all along. 2 hours later, both patients were stabilized and headed to surgery. Sarah stripped off her blood-stained gloves and checked the time. 11 p.m. Her shift had ended at 7. Monica appeared beside her. "Go home, we've got this." "You sure?" "I'm sure, you taught us well. We can handle a few hours without you hovering." Sarah grabbed her jacket and headed for the exit. Outside, the night air was cold and clear. She could see stars between the city lights. Her phone buzzed. A text from Connor Walsh. "Saw the news story about the new safety protocols at Mercy Ridge. My construction company is implementing the same whistleblower protections. You started something bigger than you know." Sarah smiled and pocketed her phone. Started her car. Drove home through empty streets. In her apartment, she made tea and sat on the couch looking at the photograph of her mother she'd brought from her father's house. Young, smiling, proud to work at Mercy Ridge Hospital. "I finished it," Sarah said to the image. "Wasn't clean, wasn't easy, but I finished what you started." The photograph didn't answer, but Sarah didn't need it to, because she'd learned the most important lesson. Speaking up didn't guarantee victory. It didn't promise justice would prevail or that doing the right thing would turn out well. It just meant refusing to participate in the lie, refusing to stay quiet when silence enabled harm. Her mother had done that 25 years ago and paid with her career and possibly her life. Sarah had done it now and survived. Won, even, in ways her mother hadn't been able to. The difference wasn't courage or skill or timing. The difference was that Sarah had finished the fight before it could destroy her. And in doing so, she'd built something her mother never got to see. A hospital that actually cared about patients more than profit. A system where speaking up was protected instead of punished. A place where the next Catherine Brennan wouldn't have to fight alone. It wouldn't last forever. Sarah knew that. Corruption had a way of creeping back when people stopped watching. But for now, for today, Mercy Ridge Hospital was better than it had been. And people were alive because of it. That was enough. Sarah finished her tea and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new fights, new moments when staying silent would be easier than speaking up. But she'd learned who she was in the fire, learned that being underestimated was sometimes an advantage, that the quiet person in the corner might be the most dangerous one in the room, That power wasn't about titles or positions. It was about refusing to back down when everyone else expected you to break. They dismissed her as just another nurse, just another disposable employee, just someone who didn't matter. They'd been wrong about all of it, and now, finally, everyone knew. Sarah Brennan, daughter of a whistleblower, combat veteran, survivor of institutional retaliation, and the woman who'd burned down a corrupt hospital system and built something better from the ashes, closed her eyes and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who'd fought the good fight and won. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but completely. And in the end, that was the only kind of victory that actually mattered.